What's up, guys? Welcome back to the MSR Workshop. So I am back out in the shop today, here to do another review for you, so stick around. All right, guys, so the review I've got for you today is one that I've wanted to do for a while, but just haven't had the opportunity, and that is on the Delta Stryker 5-50 second focal plane scope. And I've wanted to do this for a while, but this has actually been mounted on my air rifle, and so I finally had the opportunity to take it off and do this review. So let's jump in here and talk about this. So the Delta Stryker second focal plane scope is on the upper tier of rifle scopes. Now, some people will consider this a budget scope for what you're getting, but it is still a very expensive scope when you're talking, lower tier scopes, say like the Arkin and some of the other big name brands that have been pushed out there lately. So this runs in, maybe the $1,500+ range, give or take, depending where you find that. And this is a second focal plane scope. So it is meant for more of, say, F-class shooting and long-range shooting, as well as precision target shooting, say like air rifles, where you need to be able to see that really small hole that a pellet is putting in. So I'm going to get down here with the camera and do some zooming in shots, and we'll talk about this as we unbox it, and I'll show you what you get in the box. Okay, so the Delta Stryker 5-50 second focal plane scope. Now, opening up the box, it does come in a nice blue box with some information on the outside, and it says 0.05 MRADs per click, tool-free zeroing, and so on and so forth. Looking at the end of the box, we have got the DLS1 crosshair on it, which I do like the fact that it's edge to edge on the crosshairs. And the difference between first focal plane and second focal plane is as you zoom in on the zoom range, this does not change in size. Now, that being said, some people don't like that, and they're more for first focal plane, and first focal plane are more primarily for hunters. Somebody wants to dial more for, windage and hold-offs, whereas this is more of a high magnification range specific for precision target shooting. Now, immediately opening up the box, you are greeted with this beautiful and quite heavy scope. So starting off with, on the left-hand side, we have got our battery cover, which just screws off if you grab a hold of this. That would screw off where you have your coin size battery. You also have your illumination, and you do have 11 different levels of illumination with an off in between each one, which does make it very nice. And when we get this hooked up to the scope camera, I'll show you what that looks like. You have your parallax adjustment, which focuses from 10 all the way, obviously, to infinity. And that 10 is very important to me because that lets me shoot at close distances while still being able to use the full focal range and zoom range of this scope. Some scopes that are set to 25, like some first focal plane scopes, second focal plane, sorry, it makes it so you have to be at distance in order to even use the full zoom range. So I actually look for scopes that go down to 10 now, and don't look really at scopes that are much above 10 because that means that I can't use the whole range that I paid for. Next, looking at your windage and elevation knobs, starting with the elevation, you have a full 100 MOA of travel on your elevation, and your windage, you have 50. Now, I don't know if you can hear, they are both locking turrets. It is a push-pull design. Not a lot of travel on the push mechanism. And then you have your adjustments. Now, they aren't as tactile as some of the other rifle scopes on the market, especially something like, oh, what do I want to compare this to? And I know people hate me doing this, but let's say the Arkin scope, for instance. It's very loud, very, very tactile, hard clicks. This is a little bit softer. I do wish it was a little bit more loud, but that's not the end of the world. And then you have a marker, instead of being at the bottom where the whole turret goes up and down, you have a marker up top, which is kind of unique. Setting the zero stop, you have a locking collar right here. Then that should come off and you can reset it wherever you want. And then that would screw back down. Your little Allen wrench, and that is for setting the actual re-zero inside. And then you have a sunshade. Now, interestingly enough, let's look at the sunshade. The sunshade is not felt lined, so you do have a little bit of reflection in there. Most sunshades come with a felt lined inside, and that helps get rid of reflection. This is ribbed. Now, whether that ribbing helps direct the sun away from the actual lens itself, I don't know. And then the front of the shade is not threaded, so you can't use a threaded lens cap if you were able to source one on the market. Also, looking at the front of the scope, this is not threaded as well. And you have a QR code to look it up if you want to know information about it. And then here is your front diopter adjustment. You do have a screw-on throw lever. This comes in the box. It's just this little bitty guy, and that just screws on. And then you have very nice, smooth throw lever. Now, this scope has been optimized for 40 power, but it does go to 50. You do get some light drop off with 50. And when we take a look at this through the scope cam, you guys will see all about that. There are 3 different reticles offered on this. There is the DLS1, DLS2, and DLS3. And one is a MRAD, and one is MOA. The Stryker 5-50 second focal plane does use ED lenses, and it's specifically designed for long-range precision shooting. The DLS1 and the DLS2 reticles are in 0.05 MRADs, and the DLS3 is a 1/8 MOA. So if you do like MOA better, there is an MOA option available. It uses a 34 millimeter tube, and it comes with a 10-year warranty. It is not the lightest scope in the world, so that is something to take in consideration. We are at 1,060 grams. So let's get this mounted up into our rig, and we'll get the scope cam mounted up, and you guys can see what it looks like through the 4K Scopemate S28. And you guys can see what the color looks like, how much light we lose at full magnification, what you can and can't read from long distance. Alright guys, so we got the Delta Stryker 5-50 mounted up with the Scopemate S28 4K as our video camera, and currently we are on 5 power, and getting this to focus is a little bit difficult sometimes because you have to use the app to focus. You can just look through it with your bare eye, but if you record, your recording may not necessarily be in focus. So that was 5 power. This is currently 10 power. We're going to go up in 10 power increments and really focusing on that color wheel where we're losing color, where we're dropping off in light. Right now it looks pretty good, but as you see, we go up in magnification and we do start to lose a little bit of light. And with the actual eyeball, it's a fair amount brighter than it is here, and I don't know if the camera is stopping down. This is 20 power. I do struggle getting this focused just a little bit. Now looking through this is a whole different story, and actually the glass looking through the camera is perfectly clear and it doesn't add any coloring to it. But with focusing, you can't just look through the camera and try and focus. You actually have to use the app, which is a little bit of a pain if you want to get a good looking recording. And unfortunately, of course, I was getting reflection through the back of the camera, so that does mess with things probably a little bit. But in real life, it does look quite a bit clearer than it does here. And so this is 20 power. We're now at 30 power. Trying to find a focus on here. And that looks pretty good right there. Of course, you can see the reflection. There is 40 power. That looks really good. And then just this next little bump should be our 50 power. And here is 50. So at 50 power, you do see the light drop off, but color representation looks really good. One thing to note about this scope, though, it has an extremely shallow depth of field, which makes focusing really kind of finicky, and definitely you're not going to be running through the woods or hunting with this because focusing is a little bit tedious, especially at really high power magnifications. Now, I haven't owned a lot of high power magnification scopes, so I'm not exactly sure if this is the case with all scopes or not, but it is with this scope. So zooming back out all the way here. And we'll do some panning. So that target was about 50 yards away. This tree is about 40 yards. Zooming in on this a little bit, getting this back in focus. And as you can see, it has really good clarity and detail here. And my color chart was a little bit in the shade, so you're not getting the full brightness. Now let's look at something quite a bit farther away. This is actually 250 yards away. And it is a bright blue sky this day with lots of light. And I think it's just the camera probably auto white balancing this down, so I'm not getting the blue sky like I should. So this is a 10 power, previously was just a 5 power. 10 power still looks really good. The trees are pretty clear. And once again, still searching for focusing just a little bit. Sorry, the reflection is just annoying me to death, and it's washing out the camera screen just a little bit. So if you do have backlighting with any kind of sun, it does unfortunately wash this camera out a little bit. This is a 20 power at 250 yards. Sorry for the shake here. I'm just trying to adjust the focus to make sure I have it as crystal clear for you guys. Here we're going to zoom into 30 power. And that was a little bit quicker on getting the focus. And we'll jump up to 40, and I think I'll just go straight to 50 here. remember that this is looking clearer through the actual scope than it is the camera. And one drawback of having really good glass is you let in a lot of light. And I say drawback for a camera, because some cameras just can't handle the ultra exposure. Now, if you're using an SLR digital camera with some kind of rig, it's easier to adjust for exposure. Unfortunately, the Scopemate S28 4K, you really can't adjust for exposure very much. You can set iOS settings. I'll have to play with them more a little bit just to see if I can stop this down just a little bit, see if I can get a more representation of the actual colors that are coming through this, because it is more vibrant and clear. And obviously focusing with your naked eye is easier than trying to focus through an iPhone app. But what you see with your eye, unfortunately, is not what you're actually getting through the camera. Or at least that's not what the recording is going to end up being. Alright guys, that's it for this video. If you want to know more about the Delta Stryker 5-50 second focal plane scope, or any of the other products that I've reviewed, I'll be sure to leave those in the description below. Also, if you want to know more about the scope cam, this is the Scopemate S28. I will leave a link in the description below. There is a discount code for this, and I do make a little bit of commission off of this. The Delta Stryker was something that I bought with my own money, so there was not biased in any ways. And I think this is a great scope, and somebody who's looking for a little bit higher end than you would say with somebody like Vector Optics, where you could have a 60 power, but it may only cost you $200. You will notice a lot less light drop off with this scope versus some of the other scopes in a budget range option. Now, there was still a fair amount of light drop off when I got to the 25 to 30 power range. Not a huge amount, but definitely when I got up closer to that 40 and 50 power range, I did notice that lot of light drop off. Also, something that I've noticed on this scope, it has got a very fine focal distance adjustment, meaning you can turn this knob ever so slightly and it does make a difference. So you don't have a lot of wiggle room when it comes to focusing. So I did search for focusing just a little bit. But with this type of scope, you're not going to be zooming in and out. You're not going to be using this necessarily, say, for field target, where you're just zooming in and out throughout that range. Now, if you do want to use that for field target, though, they do make a parallax wheel. Unfortunately, it's very hard to find, and I've searched for it, and most of the places that carry it are out of stock. I even put one on back order and waited like a month for it. Still on back order, I went ahead and canceled that order. But they do make a parallax adjustment wheel for it. If you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, be sure and leave that below, and I try to respond to everybody. Also, if you want to know more about any of the gear that I've used today, I always try to leave those in the link description below. Until next time, guys, thanks again.